Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Career Compass, a podcast from Jurupa, a global search firm based out of the UK. For today's episode, I'm excited to welcome Stacey Smith, an experienced, forward-thinking HR leader with an emphasis on process improvement, talent management, and workforce planning. She is based out of Denver, Colorado, and works for SRS Acquiom, a leading provider of M&A and Loan Agency solutions. Welcome to the show, Stacey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure to welcome you on. How's 2024 going for you so far?
2024 has been a bit of a whirlwind. It's hard to believe it's already May, and we've done quite a bit already. We're gaining a lot of traction on our international expansions. We've onboarded, I believe, 9 of our key players between the UK and the Netherlands, and it's just really moving along very quickly. And so it's been exciting so far.
It's great. And as they say, time flies when you're having fun, right? So all these new folks coming in. We were obviously involved in the expansion out to opening in the UK and then subsequently Amsterdam. So from the outside
Yes.
looking in, looks like you guys are doing great. And we'll talk a little bit more about onboarding and people management. But yeah, just to say, great pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on to have a chat.
Thank you.
I know that you've been working in the HR field for many years now, Stacey. You even hold a Bachelor of Science in HR Management. So that's real commitment. Can you tell us in your own words how you got started in this career? What drew you towards HR from the beginning?
Well, what I would say is I've always been a people person. And from the very beginning, I started out in investment banking. And really from there, that's been my path. I guess I should say that's been my gig. I've worked across different industries like manufacturing and retirement services and now M&A. And I haven't ever deviated, into, say marketing or IT and then come back into HR. It's always really been my thing. And so my education supports that, and it's just something that I really have a passion for.
And I think if you're a people person, clearly this is a great business to be in because you're constantly dealing with people, you're communicating, you're finding ways to enable them, you're watching people progress through their career. So for all of those reasons,
Absolutely.
it's a great place to be. I'm aware that you've been in the business since 1994. You started out at Hannaford Imhoff, which is an investment banking firm. Yet clearly, the world's changed markedly in the period since, and not just in terms of technology, but also with respect to employee mental health. We've seen the rise of remote and hybrid working arrangements. What would be some of your key observations on the shifting trends in HR over the last, I don't know, 15 years, for example?
A lot has changed definitely in the last 15 years. You know, just the emphasis on work-life balance, and just really in the last several years since, the pandemic, more of an emphasis on, the total person, mental wellness, uh, certainly again, the work-life balance component, but also, flexible work-life arrangements and flexible schedules, and just making sure that employees are able to bring their whole person to work, and us supporting where we can different programs, initiatives, EAPs, whatever
Mm,
that may look like, in
mm,
order to ensure that we've got a productive workforce, and everyone is as balanced as can be.
yeah. And I think if we kind of think of the shifting landscape, what may have looked like normal stuff back in 94, you had a lot more frequencies of people staying for a long time in one company. Um, it was go to the office, commute, however long you had to be in the office pretty much most of the time. And also there was,
Yep.
and there still are to some degree, but lesser, I would say, kind of examples of toxic work environments, that old fashioned, aggressive management style, micromanagement, the blame culture. I think from my perspective in the time I've been in the industry, it has reduced, which I think is a good thing. But I guess there's still work to be done, and most of it's probably an education piece.
Well, and to your point, 1994, we're not as technologically savvy, right?
Mm,
Now we're in this world of AI and all sorts of different platforms that we can use to make processes more effective. Management styles, like you said, they're very much in the office, and probably a lot more oversight. now we're in this remote/hybrid world, and there's a lot more autonomy, a lot more empowerment. You would think a lot more trust in our employees to, manage their schedules and get from A to Z, whatever that may look like, as long as the end result is what we need.
Mm.
So it's definitely changed quite a bit. Management styles have changed quite a bit. And employees are definitely in a world where I feel that they're a little more empowered to kind of manage their schedules and their time and get that work done.
I think so, yeah, and that's overall a great thing, right? There was a huge kind of element of resistance, myself included, running a micro business effectively around, if we can't see these folks, what are they doing? And there's a huge trust element. Don't mind kind of holding my hands up and saying that, but I think that was overcome
Huge.
by
Yep.
learning the lessons of what COVID kind of delivered. That we were kind of forced to kind of move with the times, utilize the technology. Didn't apply, of course, to every industry. If you're selling cars, you have to be in a showroom. If you're a doctor, you have to be in a hospital, or a teacher in school. But I think the industries that tech has disrupted, had an impact on, has kind of made that conversation easier in a relatively short space of time as well.
Hmm. Agreed. And I think, to your point, the connectivity and the trust piece, um, I think there's a lot more effort and a lot more emphasis being put into onboarding programs that
Mm,
ensure that we're engaging employees quickly and immediately, but then also through a series of touch points, we're keeping them engaged, because we're not in the office every day.
mm,
Maybe we're hybrid and we're in a couple of days a week, working from home the rest of the time. So you just want to make sure that when you have those new team members coming on board, and also the existing team members that
mm.
you're managing, you've got to have connectivity, a series of touch points. You've got to have programs that are engaging to ensure that, everyone still feels like one collective unit.
Mm. And that is the real skill, I think, to be able to unify people that are distributed across a large geographical area, sometimes across the whole world, but somehow managing to make them feel included, part of a team, pointing in the same direction. There are challenges around that, which obviously
Yes.
we'll come to how you've developed the onboarding process. I suppose from a slightly more challenging angle, I know that when we've talked in the past, we've kind of become aware of some of the more difficult situations that you have to handle as an HR professional. So, for example, having to let people go from an organization. It's a very emotive subject, even more so at the time of recording this episode. There was a case not long ago of the ex-Cloudflare employee who filmed herself being laid off by her HR department. So, different kind of ways to view that positively. It was a kind of empowerment moment. It was transparent. It was showing how things work, how they could be improved. But then on the other side, there were quite a few people out there on social media saying this was a terribly unprofessional thing to do. They won't be hired again. They've ruined their reputation. So, in your view, personally, what's the best approach to take in such circumstances?
The best approach to take is to ensure that from the beginning of an employee's journey,
Hmm.
that there's clear communication
Hmm.
around expectations and the work product, and that you're having those conversations on a frequent basis so that the team member knows exactly where they stand.
Hmm.
I think the core of it all is communication. And for me, with the Cloudflare employee, what I noticed the most is that she did seem surprised. It seemed like this was taking place remotely with representatives from HR that she had never met before. Um, her manager wasn't there, and it seemed to be, although many states and locations have an at-will philosophy, um, it's still, in my mind, best practice to ensure that you're having conversations with your team members along the way
Hmm.
so that they understand exactly what's going on. So when you get to a point like that, it won't be a big surprise. They would have had communication leading up to that, so that they would know that, yeah, there's been some challenges. I've tried to turn it around. It's just not working.
Hmm.
It's not going to be a big surprise.
Yeah.
In addition, I'd always recommend that a manager be there, that person's direct manager, since that is, that point of contact that they're most familiar with. So yeah, I do understand, both perspectives. But I do think at the core of any sort of separation, whether it's for performance or whether it's, more of a riff
Mm.
because a business is impacted by the economy. Communication throughout, performance related with the manager, or as an organization through town halls periodically, to where you're tracking the trends. You're transparent about what the economy is doing and how it's impacting the business. Therefore, if there's a bigger layoff or risk situation, also employees are not going to be completely surprised because they would have known a little bit along the way at a high level what was going on. So, to me, best practice is communication and frequent and clear communication.
And the key word I take out of that, again, is transparency. So it's that spirit of, as you said, open communication, regular town halls. Here's the state of the nation. This is where the company's up to. We're excited about this. This is going on, but here's a challenge over here. We all need to kind of play our part effectively. So I think you're right. That situation could have been improved. I guess we don't really know what was happening behind the scenes, but for it to have been less of a surprise, perhaps, better communication. Who knows? We're speculating, I guess. But some of the stuff you guys are doing
Yeah,
is particularly kind of cutting edge. You're recognizing employee anniversaries, successes. You're highlighting people that are doing well. You're setting out future expectations. You're encouraging different viewpoints. So I think taking an overall holistic approach, if that's the right word, really has a positive impact from what I can see.
definitely. I think when you're, and I don't know if I want to deviate for a
Mm.
second, but kind of going back to that onboarding, you know, first impressions, onboarding practices are crucial to engagement. And so, it really starts out with how easy is it for someone to apply to a posting? How effective is your platform? Is it simple to use? Are they going to apply to your job? Or are they going to think, oh, this application is too long. We're not going to spend the time to fill it out.
Mm.
But then it goes into your interviewing and how easy is it to coordinate interviews? Is the communication throughout that process consistent and frequent? And do you know where you stand as a candidate? And then, of course, once we get to that stage where we're, extending those
Mm.
offers, it's leading into onboarding. And what does that onboarding look like? Are you welcoming them before they start
Mm.
with a gift basket or something? Are you setting up their orientations on day one and they have an agenda? They know what to expect. And then from there, it's really going into staggered touch points for, up to a year where you're providing training about the organization. You're soliciting feedback at different intervals. You may have a first impression survey. You may have a new employee experience survey. But then what are you doing with that feedback? Do you actually sit down, evaluate it for trends, determine what low hanging fruit there might be, make changes where you need to, or are there really good things that are being recognized through that feedback and you keep doing those things really well? But again, touch points such as those surveys, having meetings around feedback, um, going into training about the organization, making sure you're connecting the dots and folks understand, how the business flows and what the goals are. And then just really continuous training in other ways as well
Mm.
that helps support that employee in whatever role that they have. But then also for me, and it's really just at the beginning of this journey, but with AI,
Yeah.
how does AI fit into the
Mm.
picture? Of course, we have to be super careful because of security, but at least exploring, what are the possibilities? Is there a low hanging fruit where you can make something within the infrastructure easier to access? If an employee is looking for a video, if an employee is needing a question answered, can they quickly go to a chat bot, ask a question, and have that provided to
Mm.
them? Um, so that's a newer part of that onboarding experience that I'm looking into. But it's really all of those touch points collectively that help with engagement.
Yeah, and it's keeping kind of open-minded about what's coming down the track and assimilating the best parts of it. We're talking about best practice around onboarding. I've seen a trend over the last 5, 6, 7 years for slightly bigger, SMEs that have brought in people ops leaders that are being focused specifically on that particular task. So their job description in terms of how they're measured has been you're responsible for improving the employee experience across the entire life cycle. So onboarding, do they have what they need? Are they enabled? Um, and as you say, I think the most important starting points that element of clear communication, effective use of technology. I think the piece on AI is particularly interesting. We're actually having quite a few side discussions around what's the best way to build out the roadmap, what can be automated without losing the personal touch. I know you and I have kind of discussed offline about various use cases. So digital guardians, predictive assessments, how you might shorten timeframes, how you might tailor and customize that. So it's early stages, and I know you guys are in the process of evaluating. What to you is the tipping point that you don't want to go too automated, too robotic, to lose the human touch?
Absolutely. You definitely don't want to lose the human touch. We're already in this world where we're separated because of the hybrid, right? And so connectivity is critical. And I think that, for me, when I'm thinking about recruiting, for instance, maybe you can narrow the pool a little more quickly by using predictive assessments of some sort, kind of getting to that short list quicker. Um, Also, as far as onboarding goes, can you create a customized experience for a new hire or a new team member based on their department, their role? Can you really tailor it to be something they can really relate to immediately and then continue to
Mm,
build on? And so those are some of the, questions I have being early in the conversation about the use of
mm,
AI. But there's no doubt that used in the right way, used effectively, making sure that all the right security elements are in place, that it could definitely make processes more effective and help save us some time. It's just finding the right places to incorporate it.
yeah. Absolutely. I just came back from a very interesting expo in Las Vegas, actually, and there was a particularly interesting keynote speech from Professor Ethan Mollick from Wharton, and he was kind of describing some of the potential
Okay.
use cases, not necessarily just for hiring and onboarding, but I think amongst the stats that I took away, it was particularly interesting in terms of almost using the machine learning, large language machines, to be able to kind of feed in everything you would need to know about your company. So specifically, it might be a CEO's ethos around where the company needs to get to, what kind of people would fit well in terms of culture and ethos. But being able to kind of automate that in the sense of having an avatar for part of the way that kind of really
Hmm.
refines the people you need,
Okay.
um, and kind of gets you from A to Z quicker in that regard. So much potential, and we're right at the start of it. I think the comment was it's only going to get
Yeah.
better. We're actually at the bottom ended curve. So this is the worst AI you'll ever use. And you're thinking, well, if this is the worst, I'm kind of frightened to see what the best stuff looks like.
Exactly. And then to your point earlier though too, making sure there's that balance between the use of technology and then keeping that people element there, so that you can continue to, bridge the gaps and still have, a fair share of face-to-face interaction, even if it's like this over Teams or Zoom. You don't want to completely eliminate that interaction.
I think so. And there have been some very interesting surveys coming out recently, which were kind of showing both sides to it. So if it was, say, a very technically minded company that was developing a very technical product, it might be welcomed, for someone to kind of have less human interaction, dare I say. On the other side, companies that were very much about bringing
True.
people together were the opposite. They didn't want to go too far into automation. So I, I
Yeah.
think it's I think it's something that doesn't have a one size fits all approach. It needs to be kind of tailored and thought out, to represent the company in the right way.
Agreed.
I
Yep.
guess one
Agreed.
final question I would like to ask is probably around recommendation of books. So for our viewers, would there be one particular business book that you would recommend to read? And if so, what would it be?
There's one for me that really stands out. It's called The Employee Experience: How to Attract Talent, Retain Top Performers, and Drive Results. That's actually by Tracy Maylett and Matthew Ride. But for me, it really speaks to building trust, establishing mutual expectations. So not only when you have new team members, do you want to ensure that you're communicating clearly and they understand what the organization's
Mm,
expectations are, but it's also a good practice to find out what that new team member's expectations are of the company. And in order to do that, you have to build a certain
mm,
level of trust. I think that, by building that trust, it doesn't mean that, the work is going to be easy. It doesn't mean that, you're creating this environment that's completely geared towards, all the bells and whistles that someone may want. But what it is geared towards is that balance. The new team member is responsible for managing expectations and, of course, meeting the organization's requirements. But it's also up to us to establish a clear set of expectations and ensure that, they know what we're looking for, we know what they're looking for, and then kind of bridging the gap and trying to work collaboratively towards the best possible outcomes. But the book really talks a lot about that, making the employee experience a core part of the strategy, of course, as you just mentioned a little bit ago, and just ensuring that we're building a culture that's supportive, where it's transparent enough, where there's a high level of communication, and we've got consistent practices. We have a consistent approach that, of course, we can build on over time and continue to improve upon, but consistency is definitely important. And this book, The Employee Experience, talks about that as
excellent.
well.
Well, I've already added it to my list. I need to check that one out. I think it slipped through the cracks. So we'll add that onto the list. But no, it sounds great. And it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show today, Stacey. Thank you so much. I think we've all gathered some great insights there, particularly in terms of, how to bring employees on, how to look after them, how to continuously learn and improve. If anyone watching wishes to pose a question or get in touch with myself or Stacey, you'll find our emails enclosed within the episode description. Obviously, we'll welcome the opportunity to answer any questions you may have. So until next time, Stacey, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day ahead, and we will see you again soon.
Yes.
All the best.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.